All right, let's go ahead and get started. In the previous video in this unit, and we are in the skin disorder unit, in the previous video, just an introduction, talked about the different ways that skin could be damaged, the different types of disorders that could occur. In this video, we're going to talk about some specific disorders that can result from exposures in the workplace. First of all, let's talk about allergens and irritants. Primary acute irritants, a class of chemical irritant causing an immediate or within a few hours reaction with the skin, affects most people. And these are primarily, we're talking about chemicals that affect most people. Substances with a high pH level, or alkaline substances, or the alkalis, are primary acute irritants. Acids, those are substances having a low pH that can also cause an immediate or within a few hours. Usually it's a localized irritation to the skin. When I say irritation, depending on the substance, it can be more than just a simple irritation. You know, there are alkaline substances that can eat to the bone. Same thing with acids, depending on the strength, the level of the pH. Higher the pH, the worse. As far as alkalinity, lower the pH, the worse it is in terms of acids. But there's a wide variety of chemicals out there. And that SDS is our best friend, and also some of the other resources that we've talked about. We need to know what we're working with and then act accordingly. With allergens, we're talking about substances that cause an immune response in the human. Now, only some humans will be affected by allergens. Some humans are affected by some allergens. Some humans are affected by other allergens. Some humans, and I count myself as one of the blessed few, I have very few allergies. I don't know of any allergies that I have. I keep thinking that eventually I will develop sensitivity to some allergens, but I haven't at this point in my life, and I'm getting pretty dang old. So maybe it won't happen. But allergens, the difference between an allergen and a primary acute irritant. Primary acute irritants affect everyone, and it's usually a localized effect where the skin comes into contact with the irritant that's affected primarily. Allergens, they cause an immune reaction that only affects some people. There's a differential effect. It doesn't affect everyone equally. But like we talked about previously, and this is something that I'm concerned about personally as I get older, that sensitization will occur. Sensitization, the more we're exposed to an allergen, we may become sensitized to that allergen and develop an allergy or develop that physical response from exposure to that allergy, to that allergen. So, primary acute irritants and allergens, these are both different types of substances that can affect the skin. Substances that can affect the skin can result in what we call contact dermatitis, which is a broad category of skin disorders. We can have irritant contact dermatitis. That's when there's contact with an irritant chemical, like an acid or an alkaline material. Direct physical damage. Irritants can range from very strong irritants that can have an immediate effect, or marginal irritants that are only going to have an effect after extended exposure to that particular chemical irritant. Then we have allergic contact dermatitis. Contact with an allergen that causes an immune reaction, swelling, itching, rash. Contact with poison ivy, a reaction to a bee sting or a wasp sting. Again, susceptibility differs, especially when we're talking about the allergic contact dermatitis. And again, there's the potential for allergen sensitization that we've already talked about. in a wide variety of different substances, like I've already said multiple times. Know the materials you're working with. Consult the SDS. Consult the NIOSH Guide to Chemicals. Consult Table Z1 in the OSHA regulations. All of that will help protect your workers, knowing what you're working with and then acting accordingly. But we also need to know our workers. We need to know if they have any predisposing conditions, such as skin type. Maybe they have a condition called atopy, which is a condition resulting in greater sensitivity to allergens. And it's often associated with asthma. People who suffer from asthma may have this genetic condition that results in greater sensitivity to allergens. And this is an argument for pre-employment physicals. To know our workers better, to know if they're allergic to bee stings or allergic to certain chemicals that may be present in the workplace. This can help us serve them better as far as protecting them from these substances. Now, these workplace or these pre-work physicals should never be used to deny employment. They should be used to determine it may be placement, where a worker is placed within the facility, but it shouldn't be used to deny employment. Another predisposing condition might be photosensitivity, more sensitive to ultraviolet radiation from the sun. Fair skin may be more susceptible to some contaminants. I knew a superintendent that ran a concrete crew. He was fair-skinned. Maybe wasn't the best career for him. I mean, he's still doing it, been doing it for over 30 years. But because of his fair skin, he was very sensitive to sunlight, of course. He had to take extra measures to protect his skin from the sun. But he was also very reactive to some of the chemicals that were used during the construction process. Vapor coming off of wet concrete. It wouldn't cause any pain or discomfort, but it would cause his exposed skin to turn red, just the vapors coming off the wet concrete. And we're going to talk more about concrete. Concrete is one of those substances that can cause severe skin damage in certain instances. But he didn't even have to touch the concrete for his skin to start reacting to it. And it may have been, I think it was, the result of his fair complexion. Again, we shouldn't hire or fire people based on this, but we need to know. We need to know information about our workers so we can better protect them. One other example of this, then I'll move on. I had a worker who was allergic to stings from a wasp or a bee or other stinging insects. Didn't know about this until he and I were talking one day out on the job site, and he started talking. We were talking about wasps and how we have to watch out for wasps. He goes, "Yeah, I'm really allergic to those things. I carry an EpiPen." I go, "Man, you should have let everybody know this, and so that if you were stung and you did have a severe reaction, if you ended up convulsing on the job site, we wouldn't have known what to do. But now that we know that you have an EpiPen. We know where you keep the EpiPen. We'll be able to provide you with an immediate first aid response that may save your life." So from that point forward, I made it a point to let all workers know that, hey, anonymously let us know if you have any health conditions. It's going to be between you and me, or you and certain individuals with the company. It's not going to be widely publicized that you're allergic to bee stings or whatever, but we need to have this information so that we can provide you proper treatment if needed. So know your workers, know the materials, and also know the workers when it comes to allergens and irritants. Again, when we're talking about primary acute irritants, pretty much everybody has a response to that. Really, knowing your workers has to do more with allergens and what they're allergic to. Now here's an example of irritant contact dermatitis. It really doesn't show up that well in the picture, but this worker was exposed to the lime that was in stone dust. Lime is an alkaline substance, and alkaline substances, and I don't want to get too far into this, but alkaline substances can be more harmful to the skin and the eyes than acidic substances. We tend to think more about acids being harmful, but alkaline substances with a high pH, there's a skin reaction that occurs with alkaline substances that doesn't occur with acidic substances. And because of that skin reaction, if you get a highly alkaline substance on your skin, that reaction starts. It will keep eating away, and that chemical reaction will keep occurring until it eats to the bone. If something is not done to counter that exposure, if that substance is not washed away, or if there's not a neutralizing agent that's introduced to neutralize the alkaline substance. Alkalinity is what's also involved with concrete and skin reactions to concrete, which we'll talk more about. But this is a little bit of that, even though it doesn't show up that well in the picture. This is a little bit of what goes on with exposure to concrete because of the exposure to the lime and the alkaline nature of lime. This is an irritant contact dermatitis from exposure to metal polishing solvents. And different materials will have different effects. This was it dried out the skin. And from prolonged exposure to using these metal polishing solvents, a drying out of the skin becomes cracked, open wounds can develop as a result of that exposure. It's a different kind of irritant contact dermatitis. If I was in class, I'd ask you, what do you think caused this skin reaction? And usually there's 2 or 3 students, that's from wearing a hard hat. Cinching that hard hat tight down around the head and across the forehead. That sweatband can cause an irritant contact dermatitis. A lot of it's due to the friction that occurs between the sweatband and the hard hat and the exposed skin. But the chemicals in our sweat, other chemicals in our skin also interact. Heat plays a role, but it can result in a painful case of irritant contact dermatitis like we have here. There could be other chemicals in the workplace that are involved also that result in this skin reaction. Again, not likely to be life-threatening, but if measures aren't taken, if first aid is not administered, there's always a chance for infection. When there's skin damage that occurs, infection can occur, and once infection occurs, then it could potentially become life-threatening. Not to be overly melodramatic, but something as simple as this, if infection occurs, it could become life-threatening. I got a story about this. Well, I'll save this story for another slide. This is from dust and materials that got down into a worker's boots. Irritant contact dermatitis, friction, and perhaps a chemical reaction with whatever dust it was that got inside their boots. Again, this could also become infected. This could also become more serious than just a surface skin reaction. We will be talking about preventative measures in the last video lecture. You're probably thinking, well, he's talking about all these bad things that can happen. Why aren't we talking about preventative measures? We will be covering preventative measures. Also, another picture that I like to put up and ask students, what do you think caused this? This is the outline of the person's wristwatch. The wristwatch was made of stainless steel, which in stainless steel we have chromium. The worker had a reaction to the chromium in the stainless steel. A patch test was used to determine if the subject was allergic to the substance, was allergic to chromium. The patch test was negative, but it was still concluded that it was the chromium in the stainless steel that resulted in the skin reaction. There may have been other substances involved as well. Now, a patch test, depending on the industry, a series of patch tests may be used in the pre-employment physicals if your company uses pre-employment physicals. A patch test is simply a method that's used to determine what a person is allergic to. There are other types of tests as well, but a patch test is a common test to see what we're allergic to, and it basically involves applying the substance to the skin, a patch of skin, to see if there's a reaction to that substance. This is from concrete, wet concrete that got down inside the workers' boots. Again, it's irritant contact dermatitis that resulted in what's commonly referred to as a concrete burn, also referred to as concrete poisoning. It's a reaction to the lime in the wet concrete. That wet concrete gets down inside the worker's boots, gets trapped between the top of the boot and the mid lower leg area in this instance, and there's a chemical reaction that takes place. That alkalinity starts eating away at the tissue. There's also another issue going on with concrete. You've got sand and larger aggregates that are like sandpaper. So you've got the alkaline chemical, plus you've got the friction between the sand and the larger aggregates that are affecting the worker's skin. There have been workers who have died as a result of concrete exposures like this. Severe burn, severe skin reaction, infection. It's rare that it happens, but it has happened. Like I said previously, for some workers, even the vapor coming off of the wet concrete can cause a reaction. That's also very rare, but it can occur for some individuals that are more susceptible to exposure to those chemicals in concrete. Probably the worst case of concrete burn that I ever had to work with, and it still makes me mad to this day. We had a new worker. He had gone through new hire orientation. He had been trained to be aware of the dangers of wet concrete, and he knew that it was dangerous, or he should have known it was dangerous. Went out on the job site the first day. They were pouring a concrete bridge deck, and the workers are out wading around in the wet concrete. The new worker, he jumps right in with them and starts wading around in the wet concrete without the proper footwear. He should have been wearing knee-high rubber boots to protect from the concrete. He jumped right in, not having the right footwear, worked all day. At the end of the day, his ankles, feet, lower legs were just a bloody mess, essentially, from being exposed to concrete throughout that work day. And I said it still makes me mad to this day. I was not mad at the worker. I was mad at the crew for not telling him to put on some rubber boots. They knew better. And that's one thing you get into with some crews, not just construction, but other work crews. They're very cliquish, and they don't take care of the new workers like they should. This was one of those crews. They didn't really want a new worker, and they weren't going to help the new worker. They didn't care if he was injured or not, which that's a cultural problem. That was a cultural problem that we had to work on with this particular company. And I'm going back almost 20 years for this incident to a company that had a very poor safety culture. And this was one of those incidents that helped motivate upper management to understand that we needed to do something. That the culture that was in effect was not conducive to worker safety and a safe workplace. The worker ended up being okay. He did. That was his only day of work with that company. He wasn't able to come back to work the next day because his legs were so messed up from the concrete burns, from the chemical burn. Wasn't able to come back to work the next day. Never came back again. That was his only day with the company. And he might have made a good worker if the crew had taken some responsibility and taught him and reinforced for him the dangers of working in wet concrete. They all knew it. They all had rubber boots. They all had, getting a little bit into the preventative measures here, which I'll talk about this again in the second or in the last video of the unit, but best practice, you have knee-high rubber boots. You tuck your pant legs into the knee-high rubber boots, and then you'll take duct tape and tape off the shaft of that boot. You don't want any concrete getting down into your boot through that shaft, so you tape it off so nothing can get in there. Another way of doing it, it doesn't work very well most of the time because the shaft of the boots is so large. You can pull your pant leg down over the boot, and that's also going to help prevent the concrete from getting inside the boot. But you don't want concrete inside the boot. That's the first line of defense against this particular type of condition. All right, and we will talk more about concrete when we talk about preventative measures. We have another type of dermatitis going on here. We have an allergic response to insect bites. And you're thinking, well, what workplace in the world will there be exposure to insects? Well, there are a lot of workplaces where there could be exposure to chiggers, ticks, or other parasitic species that could cause this type of reaction. And not likely to be life-threatening, but it could be a dangerous distraction. Had a work crew. They went into a new area, clearing out. They were the first on the site. Their job was to clear out the underbrush and all of this, and every one of them had chigger bites all over their bodies like this. They didn't use the insect repellent. But again, that's not their fault. That is the fault of management not making sure they were using the insect repellent, which they did have in their tool trailer. They just didn't use it. That would have prevented hours and days of discomfort for these workers. Just a spray of some insect repellent around their ankles and over other parts of their body, and wasn't done. So they had to suffer for a few days, and no one was hospitalized. No one died, but it can be a dangerous distraction. If you're thinking about the itching and the discomfort, maybe you're not focused on the 80,000-pound load that's over your head, or you're not focused on the traffic that's whizzing by you at 70 miles per hour because you're too distracted by the rash that is causing you discomfort. But something as tiny as a chigger can result in skin disorder in the workplace. Some of you have probably had this. Some of you may not be allergic to this. This is contact with poison ivy, another example of allergic contact dermatitis, reaction to contact with poison ivy. I need to also mention, and you've probably heard this before, maybe heard it from me, it's not just the contact with the poison ivy against your skin, but if poison ivy is burned, the smoke carries the toxic chemical that's in poison ivy, that's in the smoke when it's burnt. And if that smoke is inhaled, it can cause lung damage or damage to other organs within the respiratory system. Another concern that gets overlooked, and this is not as huge of a concern, but sawdust from some woods can also cause allergic reactions. And I thought I had a link here. I do have a link if anybody's interested to a list of toxic woods There are several woods that are toxic: ebony, wingy, and treated wood that's been treated with chemicals. You have to be conscientious of sawdust from those species or from treated wood, because there can be a skin reaction if the skin comes into contact with that sawdust. It can also affect the respiratory system if it's inhaled. I'm losing my voice here. Let me get a drink of water. Been a long day. This is a reaction to henna. Henna is a substance that some cultures use for temporary tattoos. This is what it should look like. There's a beautiful henna tattoo. And henna tattoos are not permanent. They will go away after, I think, usually a few weeks. They will remain visible. But after a few weeks, they start to fade. Eventually, they will go away. But here's a person who was allergic to the henna, and really, really severe case of contact dermatitis from that henna tattoo. Another disorder that should be on our radar would be occupational acne. It's most common in those industries where we have workers using oils or solvents, where those materials can clog the pores. It's also exacerbated by friction and heat in the workplace and the worker sweating. This is an example of occupational acne that we see in the photo. It's not real appetizing. Again, not likely to be life-threatening, but again, it can result in scarring, it can affect appearance, and it's going to be uncomfortable for the worker. Another type of acne that we need to talk about is a little bit different than your run-of-the-mill occupational acne. Chloracne is when workers are exposed to halogenated chemical compounds. Chemical compounds, we've talked about halogenated chemical compounds before, but if there's exposure to compounds that include chlorine, bromine, fluorine, iodine, or even acetine, that's another halogen, there can be a response that looks a lot like acne. It's not like common acne, but it does look like a bad case of common acne. And exposure to these chemicals, the halogenated chemicals, can be cutaneous on the skin, or there can even be exposure resulting in chloracne through ingestion or inhalation. Fancy word for a blackhead. I thought you might want to hear this or learn this. Comedone. That's a fancy word for a blackhead, and you're likely to see more comedones with occupational acne than you're going to see with conventional or common acne. There's more oils involved with occupational acne. It's not just oil from the sebaceous glands that's causing the blackheads, but you have the sebaceous gland oils along with the oils used in the workplace that are contributing to a greater frequency of blackheads when we're talking about occupational acne. And that's primarily what we got going on here in this picture, just blackheads. Some of the blackheads are infected, but blackheads are the primary symptom that we see here in this photo. There can also be skin ulcerations that occur with contact or with exposure to certain chemicals. Chromium and beryllium can result in skin ulcerations. Also, skin ulcerations can occur if the worker is exposed to the bite of certain spiders or insects. Here we have an ulceration, severe ulceration, that resulted from the bite of a brown recluse spider or a fiddleback. We see the little fiddle-shaped coloration on the back of the spider. That's where they get their nickname, the fiddleback spider. And they are about the size of a quarter. And growing up in Oklahoma, if you grew up in Oklahoma or the South, you probably know all about brown recluse or fiddleback spiders. And not likely to be fatal, but if left untreated, it could be. What normally happens, there is an immediate reaction to the bite, and then as time progresses, without treatment, the skin ulceration develops. And this is day 3. The person was bit by the spider on their left thumb. This is day 4. Day 5, we start to see a break in the skin. Day 6, severe discoloration. Day 9, and by day 10, it has gotten really bad. I think from a safety management standpoint or the safety professional standpoint, we need to train our workers that if they have, maybe they think it's a mosquito bite, maybe they think it's no big deal, but make them aware of the potential for it to be a big deal. One of the things you can do if you have a worker that is bitten on the hand or the back or wherever, they don't think it's anything serious, have them draw a line around it. Have them draw a line around the bite. That's already getting pretty bad, the area that I just circled. But have them draw a line around their bite. And if the redness, if the swelling extends beyond the circle that you drew around that area, then they need to seek medical treatment. But in the training, hey, if you get bit by something, pay attention to it. Don't let it go. Show them pictures like this. If you let it go, it could end up like this. It could end up with you losing your thumb. It could end up with you losing your life in very severe, very rare cases. That can be the outcome with this type of skin disorder. We're in the fall of the year. When I'm making this video, here we are in late September, almost October. A lot of brown recluse bites occur in the fall. Again, face-to-face class, I would open it up for discussion, open it up for ideas. In the fall is when our wardrobe is transitioning. We're putting our summer clothes away. We're pulling out our flannel shirts and our winter clothes. We're pulling out shirts and other clothing items that haven't been worn for several months. And brown recluse spiders like closets. They like dark, cool environments. They like to crawl up inside of clothes that haven't been worn in a long period of time. That's part of the reason we see an increase in brown recluse bites in the fall of the year. So one of the things we need to do when we're getting out our winter clothes, before we put on a shirt or a pair of pants or whatever it may be, turn it inside out, shake it out first, shake out anything that might be in there, and then turn it inside out just to make sure that there's nothing in there that could cause this type of skin reaction. And one last thing on skin ulcerations and brown recluse bites. Some of you are sitting out there thinking, what does this have to do with workplace safety? Now, another story. Hopefully you're not getting tired of my injury stories. Had a worker who was on a job in San Antonio. The crew had went down to San Antonio for the week. They stayed in motels all week. The weekends they would come home, spend a couple days with the family. But anyhow, in this motel in San Antonio, it was infested with brown recluse spiders. One of the workers was bitten by a brown recluse, and it was work-related. It wasn't a recordable injury, but it was a compensable injury. Compensable meaning that the employer was responsible for taking care of any medical costs, the cost of medical care. He didn't miss any work because of it, but if he had missed any work because of it, the employer would have been responsible through their workers' compensation coverage, would have been responsible for compensating them for those lost work days, making sure they receive pay for those lost work days. And it wasn't recordable. We didn't have to put it on our OSHA 300 log because it didn't happen on the construction site, but it happened in the motel room, and the employee would not have been in that motel room if he was not on company business. That's what made it compensable, because the only reason he was there was for company business. Even something like this can be work related, and there may be other work environments where maybe you have workers cleaning out storage buildings or storage closets, or crawling under houses, or crawling around in attics. There are exposures to spiders and wasps and bees and chiggers we've already talked about, and ticks. Ticks are another disease-carrying critter that we need to be aware of, especially in certain industries. Now, I'm going to move on. I've spent enough time talking about that. Another symptom that might occur, and it's really more of a symptom than a disease, but you might see a worker develop an epidermal granuloma, a small area of inflammation that can be caused by a variety of contaminants. Again, it's a symptom more than it is a disorder, and it may be a symptom of exposure to a lot of different things. The epidermal granuloma is the body's attempt to fend off a perceived attack. It's part of our immune response. Most of the time, it's not going to be a major issue, but if I had a worker come to me with this on their hand or other part of their body, I would want to have them checked out by a medical professional. Also need to make note of this point, not all epidermal granulomas will look like this. I would broaden my previous statement out to any circumstance where a worker comes to you, you're the safety manager, and this will happen to you. Your workers, they got something on their skin. They know you're not a doctor, but they know you're the next best thing they have to a doctor in a lot of cases. They'll come to you and show you a rash, or they'll show you an epidermal granuloma and ask your opinion on it. If it's something that doesn't look right, use your critical thinking skills, use your best judgment, get them to a clinic, get them checked out. Even if it's not work related, get them checked out. Maybe it's something they were exposed to at home. Maybe it's an incident that happened at home. It shouldn't matter to us. We want healthy workers, so we should get them checked out. We always want to err on the side of safety. If we're not sure what's going on, and that's going to happen a lot where we're not sure what the condition is, but we know that, hey, that's not quite right, and we're not sure what it is, we need to get them to a medical professional that is better equipped to make a diagnosis and provide the proper treatment. And we should not be playing doctors. If we don't know what it is, get them to somebody who does. Another type of incident, really, that I need to mention, it's a type of incident that can result in severe skin damage, like we see here. But it's when oil or a hydrocarbon comes into contact with high concentrations of oxygen. Concentrated pressurized oxygen will react violently, explosively, with high amounts of heat with hydrocarbons. It could be a worker with grease on their hands, and they go to turn on an oxygen bottle, and there's a leak at the regulator, and that leak at the regulator is allowing high concentration of oxygen to leak from the regulator and come into contact with their skin. That can result in this type of injury occurring. That's exactly what happened in this incident. This is these pictures, and the picture of this regulator, this is from a safety alert that was sent out by Fluor Construction several years ago, where they had this incident occur. And good construction companies or good companies, that's what they do when they have an incident like this. They don't sweep it under the rug. They get the word out. What happened? What can we do to prevent it in the future? But really what we have going on here is a reaction of chemicals. We have highly reactive chemicals coming into contact with one another, resulting in severe burns and skin damage. One thing that we should train our workers, if we have workers that are working with petroleum products and they're working with oxygen in a highly concentrated form, make sure that they understand that they need to keep their skin free of these hydrocarbon substances if there's a potential they could be exposed to oxygen. This is a statement from the safety data sheet for oxygen. Section 10 of the SDS sheet has to do with stability and reactivity. It mentions incompatible materials. This is about oxygen, the stuff that we breathe, the stuff that we need to live. It is highly reactive or incompatible with the following materials: grease and oil. That is a type of incident that a lot of folks don't know about. But we do know about it. And if we're in a work environment where there is this potential, or there is a potential for this type of incident, then we make sure that we have control measures in place to do our best to prevent this type of incident. And the last type of disorder I want to talk about, and I think it's the most serious as far as workplace exposure. Skin cancer from workplace exposure is really common, especially if we're talking about workers that work outdoors, agriculture, oil and gas, construction. Those would be the big three industries as far as workers being outdoors and exposed to the ultraviolet rays from the sun. Too much sun is what accounts for most skin cancer cases, and a greater danger to fair-skinned individuals. This goes back to a point I mentioned previously as far as how I think we should conduct ourselves as safety managers. If we have a worker that comes to us and they're asking about a mole that keeps changing shapes, we need to get them checked out. It could be fine, it could be cancerous, but we don't know. If we have a worker that has something like this on their ear, or they have a growth on a part of their body that looks like any of these, it's not our place to say, oh, you're fine, go back to work, it's going to be okay. Perfect opportunity for us to get them to a medical professional. It may end up being benign, it may end up being nothing, but we need to err on the side of the worker's safety and the worker's health. And if a mole, dark spot, or other growth is getting larger, changing color, or seeping, it needs to be checked out. Also, if there's a sore that won't heal, or if there's an irregular shaped mole or freckle, these are all signs that there could be some skin cancer occurring in that particular worker. Now, this is another type of growth that I would also get checked out. This is called, see if I can pronounce it here, it's got a lot of syllables, keratoacanthoma. Keratoacanthoma. That's about as close as I'm going to get. It can be precancerous, can be cancerous, it can be benign. These certainly need to get checked out. And again, they're pretty nasty looking. I think most of us would understand the need to get them checked out. Now, these are the types of growths that they come and go. It can swell up for a couple of months, and then for a couple of months it kind of disappears. But if any of this is going on, it needs to be looked at by a medical professional. And we need to train our workers, especially outdoor workers that are exposed to ultraviolet radiation from the sun. We need to train them to keep an eye on their moles, on their freckles, any changes in their skin. If there's anything that doesn't seem right, encourage them to get it checked out. If they come to you and show it to you, you make sure they get it checked out. The potential for skin cancer in some industries is great, and it's something that we should be aware of as safety managers. It's certainly worthy of discussion with our workers. It should be a training topic. Speaking of training topics, the last thing I want to do with regard to this topic in this class, for now at least, is show you a video clip that would make a good video clip to show to your outdoor workers.
Hi, I'm field agronomist Jay Zielski, and today I'd like to talk about a message that could save your life, and that's sun safety and skin cancer prevention and detection. It is estimated that annually 1 in 5 Americans will be diagnosed with having a skin cancer of some form. Of those, melanoma is the deadliest, and interestingly enough, that 1 in 5 statistic, that makes skin cancers as being the most common cancer in Americans. 90% of skin cancer cases can be attributed to UV ray exposure. So those of us in agriculture are a high-risk group, whether it be agronomists, crop consultants, seed sales reps, field and research production individuals, spend a lot of time out in the sun, and so we're a high-risk group. So I'd like to talk first about prevention and then about detection. So when it comes to prevention, we always talk about wearing protective clothing. And with protective clothing, it starts at the top of your head with protective headwear. Wear a wide-brimmed hat, such as the one that I have here, that's going to shade your forehead, your nose, your face, your ears, and the back of your neck. You can see mine showing quite a bit of dirt. Well, it's very well used. Even then, when you use that protective headwear, be sure and use a sunscreen. We'll talk about that later as well. So that's the headwear. Next comes to that shirt that you're wearing, a protective shirt that is UV rated with some long sleeves to cover your arms. And there's various products on the market that are available that are UV protected. And you know, sun safety and skin cancer prevention doesn't have to take a vacation on the weekend. You like to fish. There's some very stylish UV protected stuff out there that you can wear, such as this neat shirt that I like to wear on the weekends. And so whether it be long sleeve shirts, or if you're like me, I happen to have quite a few short sleeve shirts in my wardrobe in the closet. I like to wear these protective sleeves. You'll see some that the athletes wear. There's some of the outdoor stores that have some that are UV protected. The ones I happen to buy, I'm not promoting any particular brand, but Outdoor Research, OR, very nice. They cover not only my arm, but the top of my hand. And then say you want to go inside, they're easily removable. You can slide them off and just go with that short sleeve shirt of yours. And I think the additional side benefit that I discovered is late in the season, you're walking a cornfield. You don't want to get scratched by those leaves, or maybe that pollen and anthers can be kind of itchy on your arms on a sweaty, sticky summer day. Gosh, those sleeves are very nice. And surprisingly enough, those sleeves are relatively cool. So that's wearing the sleeves. And lest I forget as well, it's important to wear sunglasses as well. Okay, not only will they protect against cataracts at some point in time in the future, but also there are some melanomas that are behind the eye that wearing UV rated sunglasses will protect as well. And of course, anytime there's a discussion about protection against sun and sun safety, we got to talk about sunscreen. Okay, I know what you're thinking. You hate wearing sunscreen. I did too, and then I was diagnosed with stage 4 melanoma. So as we look at sunscreens, several key points would be that they would be rated as far as at least an SPF 30 or greater. Number 2, that you apply that sunscreen about a half hour before you plan to be exposed to the sun, and then every 2 to 3 hours later, you reapply the sunscreen. And I think that's where a lot of people slip up. They start out with every good intention as they first go out in the sun, put that sunscreen on. They've been out for a few hours. They totally forget to reapply that sunscreen. So it's important that you reapply every 2 to 3 hours. So that's about protection. It's about wearing protective clothing and a sunscreen. Next, I'd like to talk about detection. And the foundation of detection is that self-examination of your skin. And I think you may be interested in knowing that the majority of skin cancers are actually detected first by the patient before actually the doctor, the dermatologist, or whoever. And so when it comes to that self-examination, I always like to talk about the ABCs of melanoma. So A starts as you're evaluating those moles in your body, that they are asymmetrical in shape. That's the A and the ABCs. B is as in borders. The borders are changing. Okay, the borders are irregular and they're changing. C has to do with color, that the color is changing as well. The color could be anywhere from a black to brown. I've even heard cases of melanomas being almost a whitish, so that's changing. The diameter, oftentimes when we look at moles related to melanoma, they aren't large moles. Oftentimes they're, say, about 6 millimeters in diameter or more. So that would be about the same as, saying, the head of a pencil or eraser, as far as that diameter of that mole. And E would be as far as evolving. That mole is evolving, whether it be in its shape, its color, the borders, and the size of the mole. That would be evolving. So as you look at that self-examination, whether it be your arms, your legs, your neck.
I stopped that video a little before the end, but that's okay. And the main reason, or one of the main reasons I want to show you that video is it's a video that you might use as a resource when you're doing training on this particular topic. And that brings us to the end. That video brings us to the end of this video lecture. In this video lecture, we've talked about a wide variety of skin-related disorders. We talked about irritant contact dermatitis. We've talked about allergic contact dermatitis. We've talked about skin ulcerations. We've talked about skin cancer that we just ended up with. As safety managers, let's not forget about hazards in the workplace and how those hazards can affect our workers' health. Now, one thing that we didn't talk about, we didn't talk a lot about cuts and abrasions and those types of injuries that can occur. But when I talk about preventative measures, I'll talk about some preventative measures that we can implement in certain workplaces to help prevent cuts and other types of skin injuries from occurring. And the third video, the next video in this series for Unit 4, it will focus on preventative measures, how we can help workers protect their skin from disease and injury.